louder in the back for the peanut gallery back there? Okay, a little louder, okay. Good afternoon, thank you for having me. It's been quite a while since I've had a chance to speak in public. We're talking pre-pandemic, so I'm a little rusty, so I hope you're a forgiving audience. A little bit about myself. I've worked at the Ralph Foster Museum since I was 12. No, actually I've worked there since I was 18, except for maybe a couple of summers. So I have learned a lot of information over the years, but there are also lots of publications on Ralph Foster, KWTO, the Ozarks Jubilee, all of that. And one of the most recent ones, which is kind of cool, PBS, I think this came out last year. They did a documentary on KWTO. It's called Legendary Live Country Radio. And I learned stuff from this. So it was really well put together. I'm not sure I will ever forgive Dax Bedell for making me be on video. But that's okay. I'm a big girl, I can get over it. But it was a lot of fun. I did learn a lot. And it's a very well done production. I don't know if any of you saw it on PBS last year. A couple? Okay. All right. A little bit of information about me personally. I did start at the museum. I was a student at the School of the Ozarks. That was my campus workstation for 4 years. And after I graduated, I had the opportunity to do an internship. And then I was gone for a little bit, and then the director called me back and said, hey, we need a weekend supervisor, are you interested? I'm like, yeah, sure. Yeah, it's money, it's a job. And that sort of morphed into not just a couple of days a week, multiple days a week, and August I start year 35. So I guess I like it. Anyway, so it has been a lot of fun. I've met a lot of students. I've met a lot of people who know a lot of history, a lot more than me. I am not a history major. I have a secondary English education degree, but I also have a museum master's. So the history that I have learned has been very much on the job. And I'm grateful to those who have come before me and educated me a little bit. Okay, so I have a little quiz. I made this big print, but I didn't know how big my room was. So, which state, okay, how many people are Ralph Foster aficionados? They know everything there is to know about Ralph Foster. Oh, good, I can make up stuff. It'll be fun. Okay, so which statement, this is purely a guess on your guys' part, which statement about Ralph Foster is true? He founded KWTO radio station in Springfield, Missouri. He was a member of the singing duo called the Rubber Twins. He founded KGBX radio station in St. Joseph, Missouri. And was he educated in Washington, D.C.? Anybody want to make a guess?
Probably all of them.
All of them.
It's all of them. Very good. So he's had a very long career. And he had an adventurous spirit, and probably that came from his father, who was William T. Foster. And he was a weather forecaster, and his weather forecast appeared in newspapers throughout the United States from the 1880s until his death in 1924. No other forecasts by planetary meteorologists were so widely read, or their accuracy was frequently praised. So Ralph Foster had a good role model to look up to. Somebody who was adventurous, wasn't afraid to do something. Now, Ralph Donald Foster, if you look on Wikipedia, it says Ralph David Foster. I don't know why. His middle name is Donald. He was born in St. Joseph, Missouri, 1893. So a couple of years ago. And he, as an adult, got interested in this little thing called radio. Commercial radio debuted in 1920, and as most people think with new things, oh, nothing's ever going to come of this. Well, in 1926, Ralph Foster and his partner, Jerry Hall, they had a Firestone tire store in St. Joseph, Missouri. And they decided, Ralph Foster was interested in this thing called radio, so they cordoned off a 4x12 space in the back of the tire store. They set up a microphone, and they actually got a license to run a radio station out of their Firestone tire store. That was the original KGBX. I think it was 15 watts. Very powerful. Okay, he and his partner Jerry Hall, they were the announcers on the show. They were the entertainment, along with anybody that they could snag who came into the store to buy tires. So if they found anybody with talent, they put them on the radio. So unfortunately, with having your radio station in a tire store, when somebody comes in with a flat, your radio goes, you have lots of dead air while you go outside and catch the flat. So that was a little bit of a problem. But Ralph Foster and Jerry Hall were ideal for this burgeoning radio station. They had already made several personal singing appearances on several Midwestern radio stations in larger towns. And they also sang at like conventions for different groups. And Firestone, the company, dubbed them the Rubber Twins. And they also appeared on like Firestone tire ads across the country. Lucky Strike cigarettes, do they even make those anymore? Lucky Strike? I hope not, but I agree with that. The Lucky Strike cigarettes also used the Rubber Twins picture on their billboards and their posters. And for Ralph Foster, the light bulb came on that radio could be a commercial venture. And one day he put this to the test. He announced on the radio that the first 100 customers who stopped by the tire store would be given this little, probably tire-shaped rubber ashtray and 5 gallons of gas. That was a big deal. Traffic piled up for over an hour and a half, and every ashtray was given away. Radio worked. So as the budding KGBX grew, it wasn't without its troubles. In 1927, there were 2 radio stations in St. Joseph. That's a big town. And the local signal that the radio stations were doing prevented distant radio stations from being tuned in by the listeners. Obviously this caused some problems, but Foster and Hall persevered through that. And they ended up building a bigger Firestone tire store and moved their radio business in 1928. Okay, so they decided to do some fun stuff besides them just being the entire entertainment staff of the radio station. They did weather reports, farm news, weather reports, and their music ranged anywhere from just banjos to full-on orchestras. Election results, political speeches, a daily home economics program, garden news, and the St. Joseph Church service, they were broadcast too. Now this was the interesting thing I found out. Bridge playing. Does anybody in here play bridge? I have no idea how to do this. I see this in movies all the time. Everybody plays bridge in movies. Playing bridge was popular, and it was actually broadcast on the radio?
Boring.
How does that work? The anchormen were expert bridge players, and hundreds of listeners followed along by radio at home. Okay. One of the other interesting things they did was a laugh contest. This was used to determine St. Joe's most contagious laugh, and probably the most unusual contest ever held on the radio. Friendship and service was kind of Ralph Foster's motto. He wanted to make sure throughout his career that he was friends with everybody, and trust me, he was. And he wanted to provide a service for people, something that was valuable. Makes sense. Until the Associated Press installed a wire service in 1928, getting up to the minute news was a little bit of a problem. You had to, actually if you had a radio station, you had to wait for like the wire service to give you news, and so sometimes it became a little old by the time it was actually aired. Eventually, however, capabilities of live play-by-play broadcasts were established to cover athletic events, which was kind of fun, instead of having to wait for the wire to come over and tell you, who won the local football game. So progress was being made. Ralph Foster was a big guy on service. One of the things he did was during the 1927 Christmas season, he did sort of a, what do they call the thing on PBS where it's Pledge Week? Yeah, is that what it's called, Pledge Week? They have special programming and that sort of thing, and they're trying to raise money. He did kind of the same thing. He did like an appeal to everybody across the radio to donate money to buy presents for the underprivileged kids in the area. An extremely successful venture, which brought lots of community appreciation. So he wasn't always in it for the money. He regarded prestige and honor in his business dealings as being more important than actual financial gain, which was kind of cool. The Depression hit everyone hard, including radio stations, and the competition was tough, but things were about to change. Okay. In his spare time, Ralph Foster took a lot of trips to the Ozarks, so he was down here a lot. He loved this area, loved what it had to offer. He was a big hunter and a big fisherman. He did lots of float trips with Jim Owens on the White River. In fact, there's a really cool picture somewhere. Oh yeah, of them sitting on a riverbank somewhere. I don't know if that's a hunting trip or a fishing trip, but I sort of suspected it was a fishing trip, So he came down here a lot, visited. And he noticed that there wasn't radio in the area. So he decided that Springfield needed a radio station. That was the biggest town. So in 1932, he decided to move the radio business from St. Joseph down to Springfield. Now, KGBX, instead of having, his little radio station, instead of having that 15 watts, he now had 100 watts, much more powerful. Ooh, yeah. And it was starting to become his ideal radio station. With the premise that if you were going to be financially successful, you would ditch the idea of a chain station and you would rely on local talent so that the listeners would feel like they were a part of the Ozarks as well. And I did not know this. At one time, the FCC prohibited recorded radio, recorded music. So everybody that you heard on the radio performed live, wow, which had to be monumental for, they had to have their traffic, they had to have their list of who was coming, when they were coming, what they were going to play, how long they were going to play, and just, it had to be like a logistical nightmare, I would think. But all of the music, and that was on the radio was live.
He's here.
You laugh. My students say he's still here. He wanted to get another power increase for KGBX, but wasn't able to for whatever reason. I'm not really sure what the reason was. So instead, he bought just another license of a radio station in Grant City, Missouri, which had a larger power than he had currently. And he actually moved that license to Springfield, and he changed the name to KWTO. Now, does anybody in this room know what KWTO actually stands for? Yeah, who said that? Is that you? Yeah, good. Keep watching the Ozarks. Very clever, very clever. And there's a well-known quote from a Harrison Ford, Tommy Lee Jones movie called The Fugitive. Anybody seen The Fugitive? And at one point, the Tommy Lee Jones character says, and I am going to do my worst impression of Tommy Lee Jones, "What I want of each of you is a hard target search of every gas station, residence, warehouse, farmhouse, hen house, outhouse, and doghouse in the area." Sorry, Tommy. Sorry, Tommy Lee Jones, that was terrible. Well, that was basically what Ralph Foster wanted to do, except he said, and I quote, he wanted to reach every deer lick, rabbit warren, and hog waller. So with his power increase from the new station in 1933, he was able to raise the power to 500 watts. The first broadcast was December 25th, 1933. All right. He also tapped into some of the local talent. There was a veteran newspaper man in the area named John Pearson. And he had him head the news department, doing the writing, the broadcasting, the human interest stories. And since the Foster family had this history in weather, that was extremely important. So Ralph Foster is credited with bringing C.C. Williford on board and having regular remote weather broadcasts with the assistance of the U.S. Local Weather Bureau. And then there was also two guys named C.C. working at the same place. That had to be confusing. Also had another guy named C.C. Keller, who was known for doing man at the stockyard reports. That's very important when you're in a farming community, is to have the stockyard reports, as most of my family members could tell you. So in 1944, to have a healthier competition, technically, Ralph Foster still owned KGBX and KWTO, the same radio station run by the same guy. And the FCC said, we're not going to do that. So they ordered separate ownerships for the station. So Ralph Foster decided he wanted to go with the KWTO and ended up increasing the power now in 1934 to 1,000 watts. And then in 1936, 5,000 watts.
Wow.
All right. So KGBX was actually, I think it was purchased by some people with some newspaper interests in Springfield. So it still exists. You know, it just wasn't owned by Ralph Foster anymore. Ralph Foster also, you know, when he made his trips to the Ozarks, he fell in love with the place. He had lots of, before he even brought this radio station to town, he also had a hunting lodge on Taneycomo, had a fishing shack on Beaver Creek, and also bought, at some point, a 1,360-acre ranch in Springfield called Lake of the Woods. Does anybody happen to know where that is? I was not able to find in my research where that actually was, so I thought maybe one of you guys might know. Ralph Foster was a community-minded man. You know, he did the Christmas drive for, you know, presents. He was also big with Salvation Army, doing projects and raising funds for them. He was also very active in the Shriners. He was on the Missouri State Fair Board. And he also kind of ventured into this new thing called TV. It's never going to last. He created Crossroads TV Productions, which actually produced the Ozarks Jubilee TV show. Do people remember that being on? It's a little before my time. I've seen clips. Yeah, I've seen clips of it, but I was not actually there. I'm not that old. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But it ran from 1955 to 1961, and it was in Springfield. He was also did a music publishing company called Earl Barton Music. A Top Talent Incorporated, which was a booking agency, and lots of other, you know, enterprises that. So he was kind of an everywhere man. However, one of the most satisfying experiences for him in broadcasting was producing the Ozarks Jubilee TV show. It originally started out on the radio with just the country music staff entertaining small towns in the area. But in 1953, this little TV station called KYTV, Channel 3 in Springfield, which was the second television station that went on the air. It came on the air in 1953, and a few days later, Ozarks Jubilee became one of the first live broadcast shows. While they were broadcasting live on the TV, they were also running the audio portion on KWTO. So if you didn't have a TV in your house, which a lot of people didn't at the time, you could still hear the entertainment that was going on. In 1954, the feather in the cap was getting Red Foley to be the MC for the show. And eventually the Jewel Theater in downtown was leased. Technology came up with the times, finally, and enabled the Ozarks Jubilee to be broadcast nationwide on Saturday nights. I believe it was an hour and a half, and did great in the ratings, considering everybody called it corn-fed, and it had a really low budget, but it did great. So, for those of you who may not know too much about the Jubilee, lots of stars got their start or appeared, and for a while, that little theater in Springfield was basically bigger than Nashville, which upset the Nashville people for some reason. But some of the stars, Pat Boone, Slim Wilson, Eddie Arnold, Minnie Pearl, Gene Autry, Carl Smith, Tex Ritter, Homer and Jethro, Jim Reeves, Porter Wagner, Rusty Draper, Pee Wee King, Stan Musial. That one kind of threw me. Patsy Cline, Jimmy Dean, Brenda Lee, lots of others. More than likely.
On the Porter Wagner show.
Right, yeah, that was, yeah. You know, one's kind of feed up. This is the interesting thing about Ralph Foster, is it's like a giant spider web. It's like there are so many branches and so many avenues. You had radio that did all of these new innovative things, but then you also had TV, which launched the careers of lots of people, but then also, you know, allowed another guy by the name of Cy Simon to, you know, become a big music publisher in the area. And, you know, just lots of different things happened because of Ralph Foster, because of his willingness to just kind of, you know, try something new and take a risk. The show, Ozarks Jubilee, kind of went through some modifications over the years. So it went from Ozarks Jubilee, then it was named Jubilee USA, became 5-Star Jubilee, but then in 1961, it was unable to negotiate a new contract with the networks, the sponsors, the producer, the unions, all of that, and the show was finally discontinued. So Ralph yep, he's here. Ralph Foster passed away in August of 1984. He was 91. There's some really interesting pictures of him at work. Here's some KWTO. Y'all can come look at this after I'm done talking. So it was interesting seeing the metamorphosis of Ralph Foster just physically over the years. This is my favorite picture. He was such a handsome man, incredibly handsome. I did not know this Ralph Foster. That was before my time. But over here, we actually have a picture of him talking to Missouri artist Thomas Hart Benton. This is the Ralph Foster I knew. This is what he looked like when I knew him. So, how did Ralph Foster become associated with the museum? That's named after him. So, he was a collector. His wife was a collector. They had no children, so they sort of devoted their, just fun money into feeding their collections. She loved Asian art, things from the Orient, very exotic things, and he loved Western art and Native American artifacts. So because he was a collector, he heard about this little place called the School of the Ozarks in the early 1960s and ended up donating some of his items from his personal collection to the museum, and that just started the ball rolling. So he ended up going out and purchasing a lot of items for the museum because we've never had an acquisition fund, so we've just always relied on people donating things. But he would go out and just buy something that he thought was neat, had something to do with the Ozarks, and then he'd turn around and donate it to the museum later. Well, because of this interest and because of his, just his financial support, plus his, giving artifacts and that sort of thing, the museum was actually really started in 1929 in the basement of one of the boys' dormitories, and it was called Museum of Ozarks History. But after a while, because of one of the presidents of the college, Robert M. Good, he was very instrumental in expanding the building and giving it more publicity and that sort of thing. They decided, well, let's name the museum after Dr. Good, so it became called the Good Museum. Well, I don't know if any of you knew Dr. Good. I did not have that privilege, but he was, was he as humble as he seems?
Yes.
Okay. I would have loved to have known him. I'm sure he has some great stories. But he was a humble guy, did not want the museum named after him. So when Ralph Foster came onto the scene, he sort of jumped at the chance to name it after somebody else. And that took the pressure off him. So in the mid-1960s, about 1968, around that area, the board voted to not call it the Good Museum anymore, but to call it the Ralph Foster Museum. Because of Ralph Foster's generosity, there was a section added on in the early 1960s that Ralph Foster helped pay for. And then another expansion happened in 1976, and then another expansion happened in 1984 with some of the funds he left us when he passed. But that expansion wasn't finished until 1990. So that was the last time that the building was expanded, was 1990. So that's kind of the Cliff Notes version of Ralph Foster and his career. I did have the privilege of meeting him because I was a student there. And I also worked in the office doing just a lot of, gopher work and that sort of thing. And one of the things I would gopher was whenever Ralph Foster came to visit, he always wanted a Coca-Cola. So my job was to go run to a dorm, buy him a can of Coke, bring it, make him happy. He was a funny guy, had a great sense of humor. He also, this was very impressionable for me, because when I came to college, I was poor. I didn't have a whole lot of money. But he gave a Christmas party every year for all of the staff, the permanent staff of the museum, and then all of the students. They were invited to the Christmas party. And so there was usually, some entertainment of some sort. There was always way too much food to eat, which was good. But then he would hand out to every student, and at the time there was about 36 students plus about 3 or 4 staff people when I was associated with this. he would hand out an envelope, Christmas card, and in every envelope was $20. Now, $20 in 1982, I looked it up, that's about equal to $63.03 today. That's a lot of money. $20 went a long way for a poor college kid. So that was very generous, and he did that every year, I guess, that he was associated with the museum. So that's kind of all that I have. I would entertain questions from the floor if you have any.
The dorm next to the museum originally started out as a man's dorm.
Yes.
It became a woman's dorm.
Yes.
And it got his name?
No, different foster.
Oh.
There were actually 3 fosters.
I lived in it.
Okay, I did too.
On the 4th floor.
I was 2nd floor. There were actually 3 foster buildings right next to each other. There was Anna Foster Ford Guest House.
Okay.
There was the Ralph Foster Museum, and then I can't remember the foster who did foster dorm.
Yeah.
But it was a different foster, not the same guy.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yes?
Is there a book about him?
She's going to write one.
No. As much as my English major heart might want to do that, no. There is not one about him specifically that I know of. I know that there have been some done on the Ozarks Jubilee, and I know that there have been some done on KWTO specifically, but I don't think just his history has been done. I know a master's thesis was written on him, which was very helpful in learning things about him that I didn't know.
Do you know if that video is in the library here in Branson?
The one that was running before?
The one that
Oh, this one?
was on public
Okay.
television?
I don't have an answer to that. It would be nice
Be a good
if
idea.
people could check it out. I have business cards up here, so you could email me and I can find out.
There you go.
I will be happy to do that. Yes.
Where would the museum have been in the mid-30s? My dad rode his motorcycle down here. And after he graduated from high school in Kansas, and came down, and he's the one that got us going to that every time. I mean, every time we came to Branson, we had to go to the museum.
Great, I love hearing that.
We had to go to the museum. So now that I live here, I don't go to the museum nearly as much.
I also have free passes for anybody who wants to go to the museum, so there's that. See me after. Actually, the museum is still in the same footprint that it has always been. It has just been added onto and remodeled so many times. Nobody recognizes it.
I mean, he told us about it. Well, and he ended up, I don't know where he got it, but he traded with he was a Firestone dealer.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, my dad was.
That's cool.
And so he traded with somebody at a swap meet and ended up with one of those tires. And nobody smoked in our family except one brother, so he has it in Oregon.
That's very cool. That's very cool. I'm glad to hear that one of those still exists, because I figured they probably all got used and got thrown away.
That's cool.
Any other questions?
That ashtray needs to be in the museum.
Might have a hard time getting around that.
Tell Jim and see if he'll do it, because he's got it.
Okay, any other questions? Obviously, I'll be around for a few minutes and stuff, so if you want to just, pick my brain. Not that I'll know all of the answers, but I might be able to come up with something.
We have been in the museum and it is awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. We
didn't
tried.
have enough time to go through it. We're going to go again and again and again.
Good,
Yes.
good,
Yeah.
good. I do suggest, we got lots of places to sit down while you're in the museum, but I do suggest leaving at least 2 hours open in your schedule, because there's 3 floors and 3 floors and lots of.
About 6 hours.
Yeah.
Well, 2 hours is a minimum. We've had people come and spend most of the day.
Oh,
you
we
know.
would. My husband
Yeah.
and I would.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
It's a fun place, and it's very reasonably priced, so probably the best bargain in town.
What is it, 15? Oh, that's the last time I went, I'm sorry.
Half that.
Half that. So,
Yeah,
but
so,
I'm wrong.
so we have a veteran rate of $5. We have a senior rate of $6. That's also our group rate, so if you bring a church group out, $6 each. And then our adult rate is $8. So we are so reasonable. Tell your friends.
Yeah.
Come visit. We'd love to see you.
Well, Annette, we thank you very much, and I'd like to tell you that when we have visitors come here, we always refer them to the Smithsonian of the Ozarks.
I do have one little thing to say about that little tag you just said. We can't use that tag. Our lawyers got called by these Smithsonian lawyers and said, please don't.
Really?
So I don't.
Nothing prevents us from doing it.
This is true. I can't stop anybody, but we can't use that tag. So, yeah. That was a very scary phone call. I don't want to do that one again. All right, well, thank you for having me today. It was kind of disjointed, and Ralph made his little presence there.